thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Events, programs, and
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. To our regular viewing audience, we want to thank your calls and emails and text messages. For those joining us, please continue to follow us in the new home edition of Dialogue Houston, HCC's Community Affairs, Public Affairs show now in its 26th season. We look forward to bringing you great content as we go forward during this COVID-19. We're living in interesting times in the middle of a crisis on two fronts, one medical and the other economic. COVID-19 and the looming recession and depression of 2020. We know that there are 6 phases of a crisis we're going through. We've had the warning, we've had the risk assessment, we are now in the middle of the response and management. The 2 later stages of the crisis is one we'll talk later on, which is resolution and recovery. On the health front, we know what we need to do for now. Stay home, social distancing, 6 feet apart, washing our hands, wearing our masks, and pray for a vaccine and for each other. On the economic front, here in Houston and Texas, oil and gas is still king. Yes, we did diversify somewhat after the last recession in 2008, but we're all at $15, $16 a barrel for a long ride. We are in the need on both fronts of navigators to help us steer through these phases in the middle of this crisis. Dialogue Houston will do its part with guests in the upcoming weeks to bring us on both fronts people that can help us in health, in mental, emotional, and spiritual needs, as well as in the economy. We're talking about jobs and unemployment and finance and what you can do. Beginning with the economy this week, on the economy front and economic front, when a barrel of oil reached $15 to $16, I know who I had to go to for my guest for today. It could only be our friend Chris Tomlinson, the business columnist, Houston Chronicle. Welcome, Chris. And Chris has always talked about people and business, and we are here today with him to have that discussion. So let me bring forward now Chris Tomlinson.
Thanks, Larry. It's an honor to be back with you again.
Well, thank you. Chris, let's talk about this in kind of a 3-phase approach if we could this morning. Let's start with what you see the future looking like and what will probably be a very different normal. It'll be some form of a new normal, a new nexus. What do you see that kind of looking like?
Larry, I think what we're looking at is a very different economy for the next 5 years than what we've seen for the last 5. Even with the most optimistic expectations in terms of treating COVID-19 or finding a vaccine, we have seen a permanent break in demand for oil. Every day that we stay at home, every day that we don't get on an airplane, that's oil that isn't being consumed, but is still flowing out of the ground. That's why we're seeing the prices for oil plummet so low, is frankly because we're running out of places to put the excess oil. There's only so much storage available to us. And so as this inventory grows, just like the demand and supply curve explained to us, when supply gets huge, when you have all this excess oil, the prices are going to go down, and it's going to take a long time for us to go through all of the oil that we're stockpiling right now. That means prolonged low oil prices, and that means a long time before we see the Texas economy return.
In this environment that we find ourselves, you and I have talked over the years that Houston still has a competitive advantage. With our core competencies and how we shall utilize them is going to be the question. We have weathered many storms here in Houston, and then we'll figure out how to weather this one and get through it. But I think in this environment going forward, at some point in time, we're going to be called on to really look at a different kind of adaptive leadership to really begin to do this. What do you see as some of those major changes that we're going to have to do?
I think one of the major changes is going to be our economy and what we rely on for our income and for our wealth. The Greater Houston Partnership ran the numbers. The average energy job pays 3 times as much as the average Houston job. And that's why it's so important to our economy is not so how many people are employed in oil and gas, but how much money they make. And now a lot of that is a reflection of the fact that these people are engineers. These are highly trained individuals. And what we'll need to do moving forward, and we're already seeing some of this, is taking those expertise, taking that genius, taking that innovative way of thinking, and applying that to new forms of energy, to new aspects of the economy. We have a very strong healthcare sector. I think that will grow. We have a very strong wind power sector. I think that has a chance to really take off. But, we do still have energy storage in the form of batteries and other techniques. And if we can take that genius from the oil industry and apply it to these other problem areas and find solutions, then that's really going to be the key to future success. But that's also going to require our leaders and our business leaders in particular to almost give up a little bit on what they've made their money from in the past and take a real risk and to look forward and move into new fields and new opportunities. That it's going to take a lot more risk. We're going to have to take a lot more chances.
So those factors, which are really challenges, but those I think that you addressed and others that we can apply to this, it's beyond economics, is it not? It's technology, it's marketing methods, it's product design, it's services. The demographic shift and changes still play an important part in this. And I was really struck what you said about when we lose jobs and the salary rate of around $100,000, $152,000, $200,000 a year, everything suffers. The art suffers, nonprofit suffers, because people just don't have disposable income to give to the things that they've given to help build our community. I think we use the phrase a lot now, we're all in this together. We really are going to be all of this, be all together in this, because it's going to be a new design and a new definition of community, because everyone's going to have to pull together just to provide those basic services that we've provided to a larger community.
There are very few things in the world that really kind of reminds us that we are one species, that we're one community of people, no matter our ethnicity or our nationality or, our geography. Disease is one of those things that reminds us that we are all vulnerable to the same things, and that only by working together and finding a new way of moving forward together can we prosper as a species, as a people, as a community. And so I'm really interested to see how this pandemic changes our priorities. It changes business priorities. Every crisis is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to innovate. It's an opportunity to build, but it's also an opportunity to destroy. And that's where, we're really going to have to look to our leaders to bring us together rather than to divide us apart, whether that's politically, economically, or socially.
In your wonderful columns that you write for the Chronicle twice a week, and the wonderful commentary you do online and others, you have always kind of been able to bring together the people side and the business side of helping people look at how all these things are interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent upon each other. And I think that imagination of how those things tie together going forward, as you've told me many times as we've talked offline, is that it really is that taking information and education and the knowledge and the wisdom and action, and doing something with it. But that should be something that everyone has access to and able to share and take advantage of. We found now with school being out, people not having computers, not having access to the internet, not having the things they need to be part of an information economy going forward. There are some gaps we're going to have to fill fairly quickly, will we not?
Absolutely. And I think also part of this is going to have to be people rethinking what the economy is and what business and commerce are. I approach business as one of the fundamental aspects of human society. Even before we had language as a species, we would trade things. I would give you a piece of meat if you would give me some of the berries you collected. That is the foundation of human society, is trading. And trading, business is just trading. And so on one side, we have to think about business people understanding that what they do is more than just making a profit. It is about solving problems. It is about building a society and building community wealth, not just personal wealth. But we also need the average person to realize that commerce is what this is all about, and as we move forward and we struggle with whether or not we reopen the economy and how much of a priority do we put on business and trade and reopening, and how much emphasis do we put on healthcare and the advice of doctors to shelter and shut down. These things have to be balanced, and we have to, people on the left and the right, rich and poor, everyone needs to kind of rethink what commerce is, what culture is, what our society is, and how important all of this is to our shared prosperity moving forward.
30 million people now seeking unemployment across. It's going to be a change way we think about jobs, careers, opportunities. I think a whole economic realignment is coming, as you mentioned. Even the definition of commerce, as you were saying very clearly a minute ago, will have to be redefined. But I think the expectations also of what it really means in today's society to be that entrepreneur with that great spirit that we've had and seen in entrepreneurs that we've developed really hard and long over the last few years. The idea of that person now moving from being that entrepreneur that creates their small business, and able to grow that small business over time. Given that where we are now with small businesses just trying to survive and eke out the next few months and the next couple of years, it's going to be a whole rethinking, it seems like, going forward. You have always been able, and your work not only with the paper, but across the globe, you've been able to bring some of those things and lessons we've learned from your travels and work abroad to bear on how we kind of look at it. I think sometimes we need the lens, a bigger lens, to look at who we are as a people, as an economy, as an economic engine here in this country, and learn lessons from across the globe, which I think there are many we can learn. Are there not?
Undoubtedly, we are all experiencing the same challenges, whether you're in South Korea, China, India, Texas, Germany. We are all struggling with the same issue of how do we run a business while protecting ourselves from a virus that is transmitted through touch and aerosol, our breath. It is going to, adapting to this new reality until we have a vaccine, until we have everyone vaccinated. That's going to take years, and we're going to adapt in ways that we can't even imagine yet. Social distancing, wearing masks, whether or not to wear gloves, when to stay home, when to go out. All of these questions that we really don't have answers for are the things that business people are going to try to address. Whether it's 3M trying to figure out how to produce more N90 masks, or whether it's a restaurateur trying to figure out how to space the tables, and then how to make money, because so many business plans are based on volume. And if you can only have 25% volume and your business plan requires 90% volume, you've got to rethink that. Maybe you need to raise prices, but people will only pay so much for a cappuccino. There are so many complex problems that we're going to have to solve. And we're going to have to do them with compassion if we want to maintain our community, if we want to maintain our links to one another and continue that commerce within our community. But, you're right. We're going to have to look to places like Singapore or Sweden that have allowed some reopening, that have allowed much more commercial activity in return for confining a portion of the society. These are going to be hard choices. But yes, we need to be open-minded, and most importantly, we need to understand that this is going to be a long haul. It's going to be years before we finally adjust to this new normal. It's not something that's going to come quickly.
We're going to take a small pause and break now. And we're going to rejoin our conversation with Chris Tomlinson. We'll mean human beings and how we adapt. Please stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Meet Travion. His mom went to Houston Community College, so choosing that was easy. Choosing what to study from more than 100 instructional fields? Not so much. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up, and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
Meet Saskia. She loves cars. Seriously, she whistles at them. So she's studying engineering at Houston Community College. After that, a 4-year degree. Then it's off to the races. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
Chris, right before we took a break, we were talking about a word that and it struck a chord with me, compassion. Compassion and empathy going forward in the new normal, where perhaps all what we said before we took the break, where perhaps all lives will be valued and matter. What a novel thought for it. The inequalities that this pandemic has really brought to bear, that were always there, just kind of like the iceberg, at the tip of the iceberg, right below the surfaces for some, but really aware and living reality for many others every single day, have really shown that the old normal is truly undesirable going forward, that for many people who are already at the margins and suffering and making it by just day-to-day, even that day-to-day existence in reality doesn't really work for them going into this new reality post the pandemic. So the whole social disadvantaged populations that you have written about many times is really going to be a big piece of what we do going forward, is it not?
There is no doubt that, the pandemic has revealed problems that that most of us, weren't paying attention to. We see the disparate health responses across communities, across ethnic groups, across income levels. And you're right, Larry, it really does reveal some of the inequities that have been lurking in our society that are really easy to ignore when most of us are prospering. And it's sad that that we can't recognize these problems until they affect a larger community. And I wish we were at a place where every life mattered equally, and that when one group of people or one individual suffers, that we all consider that an affront to what we think is just and right in our society. That's the dream, right? Is that one day we'll reach that level of enlightenment and compassion for other people. I am encouraged, though, by what I'm hearing from leaders in the business community about the need to serve not only shareholders, to serve not only the people at the top of the wealth pyramid who have invested and expect a return. And we were seeing this even before the pandemic. The Business Roundtable last fall came out with Jamie Dimon as the chair from JP Morgan Chase, saying that we have to have businesses that are concerned about all stakeholders, not just shareholders. That means the community, it means customers, it means employees, it means people involved in the supply chain. The old Gordon Gekko Wall Street idea that greed is good, I think that idea was well on its way out. It has to be thrown out now that we've seen how broken our public health system is, how fragile our economy is, and frankly, how reliant our private sector corporations are on government aid. It only took 2 weeks of this pandemic before some of the largest corporations in America were begging for help from the government and from the Federal Reserve. If they're going to come to us expecting a handout when things get tough, then we have every right to expect them to show greater sense of community obligation and sense of supporting the community, as well as shareholders, employees, and everyone involved in that supply chain. I hope that change is coming. I believe it is. I believe that and if nothing else, it's the millennial generation that's bringing about this change. A lot of millennials will not go to work for a corporation that doesn't share their personal values. And that's the big reason why you're seeing so many major corporations talk about something you taught me about, which is servant leadership. And I will always be grateful to you, Larry, for your education on the importance of empathy and service as integral parts of doing business.
You talked the last few minutes there. Malcolm Gladwell's, you think we're at that point? You think we've finally reached that tipping point where the balance of the brilliance of all segments of society to leverage and solve our most pressing challenges will be called upon to give its concerted wisdom on what needs to be done socially, economically, politically, and really begin finally to address some of these things that, as we both have said many times, have always been lurking there, have always been present, has always been impacted in more people's lives than others, and therefore was never really acted upon. Maybe now we can actually do some change, real change.
My hope is that we will see real change. But in order to achieve that, we need to have real leadership. And I think as we see the pandemic become extremely politicized, when whether or not you wear a mask is a sign of your political alliances or your political partisanship, whether or not you believe that having a quarantine saved lives or not has more to do with your political party than it does with your understanding of science, that's discouraging. That's the kind of thinking that will lead to more deaths, more disease, and more economic hardship. So my hope is that we will see leaders emerge not just political leaders, but social, cultural leaders, community leaders, and more importantly, business leaders emerge to start speaking up about bringing about the change that is necessary. And what we have to prepare ourselves for is that the more people talk about change, the greater there will be resistance to it from some segments of our society. I would like to believe that the pandemic would have created more empathy and compassion in our community. But frankly, whenever you have something this terrifying, fear will produce panic, it will produce anger, it will produce resentment. And so we need leaders to help us understand the difference between being compassionate and being selfish, and which one is actually going to get us through this in the best possible condition.
Chris, I think that's a good note to end on for this week because we're about out of time, but we will have you on in future segments to kind of build upon where we're going in this reality as we create this new reality and the new normal, whatever it looks like. Thank you for being on this week's Dialogue Houston, and we'll make sure we continue this dialogue as we go forward. A few closing thoughts here. Since all change is linguistic, the more we talk and the more we share and the more we communicate with each other, the more we express our fears, our doubts, our hopes, our reservations, our joys, our wonderful ideas for the future, the better off we're going to be. I think it is a time now going forward very clearly for an servant leader, someone who understands both the ability to be that adaptive leader and that servant leader combined together that will get us out of this as we go forward. I think it is time to talk about real systemic change, not just tweaking around the edges and fine-tuning, but real systemic change and eradication of some of the issues. I think it's time to look at a deeper understanding of what justice is, not only social justice, but every aspect of justice. We're good at charity. We've learned charity. We have charity and social service down pat. We got to figure out how to learn and do justice as well as we've been able to do charity. And I think part of that has to end and be with the establishment, the nurturing and the maintaining of the proper kind of relationships with other human beings who may be different than myself. Relationships build trust and respect because at the end of the day, nothing's going to happen and nothing's going to change unless there's trust. Nothing happens without trust. And so as we bring people together around the table to have these discussions and dialogue, let's not do what we've done in the past. We've made room and a seat at the table for various people, for various kinds of people, for different kinds of people, except we've never accepted their voices to be equally around the table. We have to listen to everyone. Everyone has input. Everyone has something to offer as we create this new reality, this new normal going forward. Until we join you again next week for Dialogue Houston, until the next time, be well, be safe, and as always, peace, power, and love.